One second.
The webinar will be recorded. I think the IT has already started recording. So I hope that's okay with you guys.
Yep.
All right, wonderful.
So Arifapa, I think I'll wait a little bit more.
Maybe another couple of minutes. I think
everyone, a warm welcome.
Sorry, go ahead.
Okay. Good evening, everyone. A warm welcome to you all. I hope everyone is safe and healthy. I am Seda Farzana Sultana, Assistant Professor at the Department of English and Humanities at ULAB. So the title of today's presentation is Technology as a Cultural Artefact, the Figured World of Educational Technology in Higher Education, a relevant topic in our contemporary world. The talk will be presented by three scholars from the University of Manchester, Dr. Taslima Ivy and Dr. Haleema Sadia and Mr. Felix Kwihangana. I hope I said it correctly. So I will introduce our presenters in a bit. Before that, I would like to thank our respected presenters, first of all, today for joining us. Also, I would like to actually remind you all, the people who are present in this session, to mute yourself. And we plan to have a question answer session at the end of the session. So I would like you to interact in the chat box and post your questions as well and comments so that our presenters can get back to those, and I will try to moderate the questions as well. Moderate means, I will reach it to them if needed. Okay. And I would like to invite our honorable head of the department, Ms. Arifa Rahman, to first welcome our guests, and then we will get started with introducing our presenters.
Thank you so much, Farzana. It was nice chatting with you all just before the program began, but let me formally welcome you to ULAB and the Department of English and Humanities. It's a great pleasure to have you, three of you, presenting to us a topic that is of great relevance in today's world. You have all the right keywords in there, technology, culture, artifacts, and of course, higher education, with which we have been grappling with the last 1.5 years. So thank you so much for doing this. And I'm very glad to see that there has been a wide response to this program from a variety of institutions, as well as from a variety of departments. So you can tell how important this topic is to all of us. So I will not take up too much more time, and I will hand the floor back over to you, Farzana. And I hope that our acting Vice Chancellor, Professor Shamshed Murtaza, who is also the Dean of the School of Arts and Humanities, will be joining us soon. So he will be able to also thank you or make some comments on your presentation at the end. So looking forward to this. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Arifapa. Now it is my pleasure to introduce our three presenters, our guest speakers today. Dr. Taslima Ivy is a senior tutor at Manchester Institute of Education, University of Manchester. She is particularly interested in the use of ICTs in education in developing countries and sociology of educational technology. She had previously completed her MA in educational technology and TESOL from the University of Manchester, which is where her interest in this area took shape. Before her PhD studies, she had been working in Bangladesh as an assistant professor at the Department of English, University of Dhaka, Bangladesh, where I went to, and actually Arifapa also went there. And Dr. Haleema Sadia is currently a senior tutor at the Manchester Institute of Education, University of Manchester. Her research interest is in international students changing identities in the transition to UK higher education and visual methods. She completed her PhD from the University of Manchester in the area of international education using Holland et al.'s theory of identity. Mr. Felix Kwihangana is a language teacher and teacher educator. His research interest is at the intersection between teacher identity, language teaching, and educational ICTs. He is currently working as a senior tutor in education in Manchester Institute of Education, while also working towards a PhD in education. In this PhD study, he uses positioning theory to analyze policy and educational practitioner discourses to understand pre-service teachers, digital teacher identities, and the processes in which these are negotiated in an under-resourced context. I would like to actually hand it over to our guests now.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for introducing us. And a bit of a good news, like Felix is also to be a doctor very soon, because yesterday we just, he submitted. So
congratulations.
Yeah. And within this very pressuring time while he was submitting, I'm really grateful that he also prepared for the presentation and everything. And also grateful to Haleema for all of your time and agreeing to present.
Yeah, thank you very much, guys.
Yeah, thank you. So I'm going to start right now. So as you all know, today we're going to talk about technology as a cultural artifact. And before we start, I'd like to just tell you about what we're going to do and the things that we are going to cover. So we would like to start with a discussion on the importance of a sociological view of educational technology. So in our presentation, we're going to look at technology not as something very material, but as a cultural and a social tool. And before we begin, we're going to talk about why we're taking such a stance. And then we are going to move on to what we understand by cultural artifacts and why we were talking about this in relation to this concept of figured worlds. Once we introduce that concept of figured worlds and cultural artifacts, we will particularly look into four dynamics or four kinds of interactions that Holland et al. Talk about. So one is the figured worlds and figured identities. One is positioning and positional identities. Orchestration and agency, world making and agency. These might not make much sense to you now, but we'll try to make sense of all of this while we are going through the presentation. So let's start. Why study educational technology or even technology from a sociological perspective? So I was inspired by Selwyn's work, Neil Selwyn. And he works in this field of educational technology. And while he was looking at the studies that we do in educational technology, he found that there are some predominant themes. For instance, we focus on practical themes like contextual individual challenges, what enables technology use, what are the best practices of technology use, what are functions of different technologies, how can we best use them. So that is one area. Another kind of area in educational technology focuses on pedagogy. So how do we teach best with technology? How do students learn best with technology? What could we do? What should we do? There are other areas which focus on psychological. So people who are in teacher education might know, like it's all about teacher cognition, teacher knowledge, teacher perception. What kind of knowledge do they need? What kind of perceptions do they have about technology? So this, in short, is what educational technology as a field has been doing and looking into. Now, what Selwyn argues is that these are practical and very important areas, of course, but these leave some things out, and we are going to look at those arguments. So when I was reading Neil Selwyn, I went into educational technologies in Bangladesh. And for my literature review in my PhD, I looked into the predominant themes that we do our research here. And just like Neil Selwyn shows in the wider world, in other contexts, even in Bangladesh, I found that the studies focus on what are the lacks, what are the barriers, what teacher skills we need, what kind of knowledges we need, what kind of classroom pedagogy, what could be done, what should be done, everything kind of looking into the future. And then when I looked into the studies done by donor agencies like English in Action, Access to Information, so these are government agencies, international donor agencies, They come in, they integrate technology, and they say, oh, these are very success stories. So narratives of how successful they are. So the literature at the moment is either very negative, there's nothing being done, or either very positive. It's very simple, you can say. And what the relationship is then between a person or a teacher, a tool or technology, and the context is very linear. So whether you're looking at technology or whether you're looking at educational technology and you're looking at these practical aspects, like what are the lacks, what are the barriers. So most of the studies that have been done are done from this very linear perspectives. There's a subject, a teacher, a community. You give them a technology to do something with predetermined outcomes, and then they change the context. That's the underlying ontology or epistemology, if you want to say. Now, what Neil Selwyn, and then in our context, there is this writer, Anwaruddin, what they and then broader areas of technology studies, like social shaping of technology, that is an area by Williams and Edge. What all of these scholars argue is that the relationship between the community, the actor, the tool or technology, and the context is not linear. It's very recursive, iterative. So they shape each other. Once you give a person a technology or a tool, they shape technology, technology shapes them. Once you give technology in a context, not only does technology shape the context also shapes technology. So in this way, they try to explain that sometimes when we implement technologies somewhere, you cannot always determine what's going to happen. There will be many different outcomes. So the same educational technology, if you put it in UK, there will be a different kind of outcome. If you put it in Bangladesh, there might be a different kind of outcome. That's the result of all of this shaping and reshaping that continuously goes on between the actor, between technology, and between the context. So what they're trying to say here, that we need to take a more dynamic view. We need to look at the social, cultural, political interactions that go on continuously day to day. And then we can see, or then we can better conceptualize why technology works in a context or not, why it doesn't work in a context or not. We need to capture the nature of those interactions that go on. So instead of conceptualizing technology, that is something very material, very fixed, what sociologists of technology and sociologists of educational technology argue is that we need to view it as something that is shaped in context. They are continually subjected to a series of complex interactions and negotiations, social, economic, political, cultural context into which these emerge. Now, a word of caution here, what the sociologists of educational technology say is that this is not the best perspectives, but this is a complementary perspective to whatever else we've done. So whatever else, what other views that we have, those are very important. Those have kind of took us forward in terms of knowledge in very important ways. But the sociological perspective was something that is missing. And if we can have a look at technology and these interactions, it might help us better understand how technologies are implemented, how we achieve the outcomes or not. So this is a complementary perspective to better understand how and why kind of questions. So that's where Selwyn ends, and that's where our theory comes in. So educational technology ends there, seeing that we need to look at these interactions, we need to look at social interactions, we need to look at the interactions between teachers, technology, and context, but they don't name the kind of interactions. And while there are many different sociological theories available to look at these interactions, one of those theories might be identity and agency and cultural worlds, that is Holland's theory. And in the rest of our presentation, we will try to explain how we can view those interactions through Holland et al.'s lens. That is our aim. So I'd like to hand over to Haleema now to introduce the theory a bit.
Yeah, so here we are going to just talk a little bit about theory, yeah? First of all, thank you for giving me all that respect and that beautiful words. I'm really over the moon. So really a pleasure to, to be here. So today we will talk about our understanding of the Holland et al. Theory. It's kind of like a big field. And then the book is called Identity and Agency in Cultural Worlds. And in this book, actually, Holland et al. Bring together all these theories, theorists like Bourdieu, Vygotsky, and Bakhtin, to step further in how people construct identities through their engagement in these social worlds. And in this presentation, we will build upon it. We will bring all these ideas like one by one, because these are very kind of hard to absorb ideas. Actually, I'm saying this because we faced it difficult. We found it difficult, and we tried to make sense of it in like easy, understandable ways through our very good group, which is called Social Theories of Learning group at the University of Manchester. We love that. So I'm saying that because of so we'll come back to each of them soon. Yeah. Hand over back to Felix. Yeah. I think you are muted.
So we're talking about technology, and we're talking about figured world. The theory being figured world. One of the important concepts in this theory, which basically is about understanding how people create or reproduce culturally a certain way of interpreting and being in a given, as they call it, world, or so how they end up figuring who they are. And one of the tools that help them do that is what they call cultural artifacts. Now, a cultural artifact, we will be coming back to this concept throughout the presentation. A cultural artifact being, in probably, if you like to use the simplest terms, is a certain way of human beings use to construct and interpret what they are doing. And we're taking technology as a cultural artifact because it shapes who we are as, at least if you live in the technology world, it will shape how you act and who you act with. I'm going to use two pieces of technology to identify how technology should be conceptualized or can be conceptualized as a cultural artifact. That is a way of reproducing the world in which we live. Now, I'm taking two examples. I'm going to use first a projector. Now, when you hear a projector, what does that signify to you? When you hear a projector, there is a way, a set of meaning, interpretations, contexts that you will associate with that, because that reflects your lived world. So for a teacher, for instance, or someone who has only used a projector in teaching, a projector will have that classroom setting where there is a wall in which they are going to project, and that reflects the world they live in. Now, the projector itself, being that piece of technology, is no longer just a piece of technology. It has all that cultural, educational context associated with it in your lived world. And that also affects the way you reproduce the world in which you live, if you like. Because in that case, if you're using a projector, for instance, it is going to affect how you interact with students in a classroom, for instance. And that is going to bring in a new way of teaching, if you like. But that will also depend on each person, on your own individuality. And because Holland and colleagues consider cultural artifacts to be objects, but also discourses, or even ways of behaving. Those can be, even people can be artifacts, according to Holland. Because if in that case, then you're acting or you're becoming a way of mediating, using this to mediate your thoughts and actions and make sense of the world you live in. And this is going to influence how you deal with these things. Then let's take another object, a mobile phone. Now, there are also other ways of living the world or even figuring who you are and mediating your actions and thoughts with the mobile phone in a particular way. Starting with what a mobile phone is to you. When you see someone having a mobile phone, what comes to your mind? Let's say I pull out an iPhone from my pocket. What do you automatically see? What kind of world do you locate me in? Of course, we're going to come back to that when we go to positioning. But if you see me having a certain type of telephone or mobile phone, you already locate me in a particular world. And you associate that with other things. So you basically associating different cultural forms to the fact of seeing me with a particular mobile phone. But even from a personal or an individual subjectivity, how do you use your own mobile phone? It's not just because it is a technology that you have. You have a particular way of mediating your world using that mobile phone. You have a particular way of texting when you are, of writing, let's call it texting, of writing when you are using a mobile phone that maybe you don't usually use when you are writing an academic paper. And that shows how you're mediating this, or this piece of technology is mediating your world. Now, it's interesting that we react differently because of that particular technology in that particular world. You may be fine reading someone who writes HRU and read it as how are you in a text message, but you would be offended if your colleague sent you an email using the institutional email, say with the same abbreviations, because now you're reproducing a cultural form that is not appropriate for that lived world you are trying to represent. So technology in that case then becomes an artifact that shows how to live and be and interpret the world you live in. Up to you, Ivy.
Thank you very much, Felix. When you were saying that, I was thinking in my head, like, what do I think when I see someone with a very up-to-date mobile phone? I immediately think of certain social class. And then if someone pulls out a very old Nokia phone, I immediately position them to another class. And what we were saying, it's not about the technology itself, it's about the experiences and lived worlds that we associate with technology. So technology brings me back to Holland, who says technology, cultural artifacts have a material form, like an iPhone and a Nokia, but with them, they have these social cultural meanings when they become a cultural artifact. And then we use them to position ourselves and other people all around. Thank you very much, Felix. That was very clear. So now we're going to move on. Oh gosh, what happened? Okay, yeah, it's working. So now we're going to move on to look at what Holland et al. Says about these interactions. So we've learned that cultural artifacts take on meanings from these lived worlds. Cultural artifacts can be used to position individuals. But how does that happen? As I was saying when I was talking about sociology of educational technology, everyone says there are interactions. And I was thinking, does anyone name these interactions? Does anyone follow the mechanisms through which a mobile phone gets its meaning of social class or not? Can we name them? Can we follow the nature? Can we jot down the mechanism? And this is something that can be done with Holland et al.'s theory. So Holland et al. Kind of talks about 4 kinds of dynamics: the figured worlds, positioning, authoring, and world making, which help us to understand how, when you put a technology in a specific context, over time, the interactions and how it becomes a cultural artifact. And we are going to explain all of these 4 kinds of interactions now. And through it, we will try to see how educational technology, when you put it in a context, or even any other technology, might become a cultural artifact, something more than just material technology. Of these 4 processes, the first 2 processes are through which lived worlds give meaning to the cultural artifact and give identities to us. And the last 2, authoring and world making, is through which we as individuals can refigure cultural artifacts. We have a bit of agency. So we're going to explain all 4 of these now. And as far as I remember, the first dynamics, that is how figured worlds come to shape cultural artifacts, what we understand by figured worlds, how they put on meanings into technologies. That's Haleema. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So welcome. So hello again. Okay. Now I would like you to open this Padlet.
Okay. Let me share it. I think I haven't. I'll post it in the. I'll post it in. What do you say? In the chat area, Haleema?
Yeah.
Sorry for that. Actually, I could have posted that, but that's fine.
No, that's
The
okay.
chat box, yes.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
It's a good chance to see you all again.
Here it is. Yeah.
Thank you. Okay, so as an activity, I would like you to open the Padlet. Can you please share the slides again?
Yeah. Yeah. So this was, can you see it? This was the instruction.
Yeah, and could you please share an image that represent use of technology in Bangladeshi classrooms. So keep this in mind, in Bangladeshi classrooms, okay?
And I've put that instruction in the Padlet as well, so they can find it there.
So I would give you a little bit of time, and then how much time I'm allowed, Ivy?
5 minutes.
Okay, yeah, 5 minutes. Take 5 minutes and yeah, find a picture which represents a classroom, a Bangladeshi classroom. So choose one.
Technology. So what is technology to you?
Yeah.
In
Now, to be clear, this should be an image it may be an image you have taken yourself. Maybe that represents what you do, but it can also be an image you just get off the internet if you
yes,
want, as long as it is from a Bangladeshi context.
Yeah, anything which you have drawn before, anything, yeah. It represents to you.
Let me see the chat. Oops.
There's nothing.
There's nothing yet, yeah.
So once everyone is done with it, you can tell me, go ahead. You can go ahead then.
Okay, we have our first image.
That's great.
Yeah.
Anyone else?
Let's wait for at least 2.
Yeah, great. Here you go. You can see it.
Yeah, here they are.
Yeah.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
Okay, I think we can, I can continue. Yeah, this.
Yeah. Ah.
Oh, is that my role? No, oh no, who is that?
Interesting.
I posted it actually.
Nayeli here. Oh, hello, Nayeli.
Hi, Ivy. Hi, Felix. Hi,
How are
Haleema.
you? How are you? So Nayeli is our colleague, a lecturer at University of Manchester, MIE.
Hey, everyone.
Thanks for dropping by. Thank you.
I was wondering if I should put one picture from, my classes at the University of Manchester, but I'm glad that somebody put Zoom there. So done, job done.
Thanks for coming.
Yes, thank you for inviting me.
We can draw on Nayeli's expertise as well now.
I'll be here. See.
Okay, so shall we go now to the next slide, please? Yeah.
Yeah. So I'll stop sharing this and I'll share.
Sorry, the idea is actually that you have put a picture. We will explain a little bit about figured world and about this theory, and then we'll go back to these pictures. So don't think that we just skipped it. We'll come back. We are coming back here, okay? We are coming back here. Okay, so now, actually, Felix has talked a little bit about artifacts. I wanted to talk a little bit from like my culture. Pakistan. I'm from Pakistan, yeah? So like, for example, the Holland and Skinner, they talk about that the local context, they shapes the meaning of the object in lived worlds. So for example, a piece of cloth like this one, when we use it as a veil, like, so for example, as a scarf, it's an artifact. Similarly, a paper, for example, if we use it as a fan, it's now an artifact for a fan, yeah? So I would say that it's kind of a symbolism of an object in a culture, so we can call it an artifact. Holland et al. Then says that artifacts are verbal, gestural, and material productions. So as Felix was talking about, like that, they could be even discourses, they could be even people, like, so like characters, like, so these are, that's how we say. So we argue that the social world can shape technology by assigning meanings to it. Now let's make, let's take an attempt to understand how the social world works according to figured world. So according to Holland et al. So Holland et al. Give us this definition that figured worlds are socially and culturally constructed realms of interpretation. Now, what does realms of interpretation means? So if we take it into context, so for example, if I ask you that there are, like, imagine, it's not that I'm saying that these are the only, but like, for example, imagine mosque is one of the figured world, or mosque is one of the building, let's say. It is made up of mosque, home, school, all are made up of stones and bricks. But because we socially and culturally interpret them into these realms, we behave differently in school and mosque and home. So let's call them as figured world, yeah? So now when we say these are socially and culturally constructed realms of interpretation, so we would consider, like, think about such spaces, yeah? Those spaces as if these are our figured worlds, yeah? Where particular characters and actors are recognized, okay? So if I take, again, into those subspaces, so we have teachers in schools, we have imams in mosques, and we have parents at home. These characters have a certain hierarchy in the power structures. So for example, we also call them figures, and they are the most influential others in that figured world. Like, so for example, the teacher, the head teacher, the vice chancellor, all these kind of like hierarchical power structures are there, yeah? Then we have this thing that significance is assigned to certain acts. If we go to that one, that now in these figured worlds, particular, sorry, I think I missed one, characters. Particular characters and actors are recognized. We talked about this, mixing it, sorry. particular characters and actors are significance is assigned to certain acts, yeah? So for example, obedience to parents, conformity to Islamic laws in mosque, and memorization of the text in school. These are the acts like which we perform in these different subspaces. And particular outcomes are valued over others. So these relates to cultural beliefs that informs our actions. Like, so for example, we have a cultural belief in Pakistan that woman is good for home, which shapes women's decisions. And therefore you can see more women studying medicine or going into teaching rather than engineering and other like field, like open field work. Thus we may say that medicine is given preference over engineering for women in Pakistan. So now at this point you might say that no, but we can see a lot of women engineers in Pakistan. Now that's the difference, because cultural models are cultural beliefs which informs your actions. So for example, in culture, woman is good for home, but then some women would decide, no, they don't want to be good for home. They want to go to engineering. So they position themselves in resistance to that cultural model. So actually that takes us to the field positionality, where we say that there are certain cultural models in the culture, but individual either align to them or resist to them. So they can position themselves in alignment to the cultural model, or they can position themselves in resistance to the cultural model. And that is what positionality is. So figured worlds, then within figured worlds, we have cultural models. Within figured worlds, we have cultural artifacts. Within figured worlds, we have characters and figures and like who position themselves differently. Now, I would like you to go back to, does it make sense? Sorry, if it doesn't, so please, I'm here to clarify. Does it make sense?
Yes.
Yes, okay. So if we go back to the activity, yeah, and I would like you to that Padlet area, and in the pictures, if you can tell me on the Padlet that what is the space, like what is that figured world? What is the space? What is the realm of interpretation in that particular picture? And then tell me what are the characters and their position in the power structures. So for example, if there are teachers and students, who has more power, yeah? What are the acts to which significance is assigned, you know?
So I can see like two very contrasting figured worlds. So for someone, it's the classroom. For someone, they're more associated with the home and children being addicted to it. So in their figured worlds, it's more about children and technology at the moment. That's what they're thinking about. In the classroom, it's different.
Good. And what particular outcomes are valued over others in the context? So yes, we can, as Ivy have identified, we have several figured worlds in here. So technology at home, technology in the school, and technology right now internationally, like on Zoom, and like technology in a university. So we have all different contexts, all different figured worlds. Would anyone like to explain or talk about their picture or image or anything?
Well, there is also a cultural, or at least an interpretation of what technology means in this context. At least the third picture with a text, it says children hooked on screen. Is technology taking away learning? Now, there is an interpretation of technology here, as so there is a cultural, or what you could call a meaning to this technology as a barrier to learning, because the text says it all. Taking away learning. So you're interpreting technology, again, educational technology. I'll come back to that when we talk about positioning, but there is already a link between technology and learning, and that is not a positive link here in interpretation.
So that's the figured world of a figured world usually gives meaning and tells us what is normal and what is not normal, what is good, what is bad. People usually make meaning. So in this figured world, technology is not being seen as something very positive, right?
Yeah, so we have figured worlds, different figured worlds. We have characters in it. We can see characters in it. We have certain acts of learning, teaching, all that. And we can see that certain outcomes, as Ivy and Felix has identified, are valued over others. It could be positive, it could be negative. And the way the positive and negative is their positioning around those cultural models. So I would hand it over back to Ivy.
Yeah. Would any of the participants like to talk about like why they posted what they posted?
I think I'll just take the chance to talk a little bit about it. I posted the one from today's presentation, actually, because that's pretty much sums up how my classroom looks like when I teach online. You know, we have Zoom, we do not use Zoom, we use Google Meet, you know, these synchronous sessions when we are online and we talk and the students are there, we just see the names, that's it. Very rarely, you know, we get to see our students' faces. And sometimes it becomes really difficult to make students speak. So it's a very like, you know, passive kind of scenario when we just see these, you know, pictures, that's it. So to do, to like, you know, sort of bring it here, I took a picture of today's presentation, you know, it's similar.
So to me, that kind of speaks like Zoom is a technology, right? And it in and of itself, it has its material properties. What we're doing here is when we're bringing it into our world of what we know to be normal classrooms, there will be a teacher, there will be interaction and everything. And we're evaluating it against that figured world, Zoom, technology. And then we're putting on that meaning of, oh, it's not giving me what I want and everything. So you're giving the meaning against your figured world of teaching and learning and what teaching and learning should be like. Anyone else want to add to that?
I posted the fourth picture, which is, as one of my students has pointed out, it's an ad. I posted that the moment you asked the question, I thought of a couple of things. One is, of course, the student-teacher interaction and the method in which it is done, you know, through the computer, wearing the headphones, sitting in front of the screen, using the paper and the pen to take notes. So all that is represented through the picture in the inset. But the picture on the outside is also, I think, kind of representative because we're using, during this time, we have been using the social media platform to reach out to, you know, potential students and their guardians and all that. So I thought that this picture actually did like you know, had a multiple purpose. So not only showing the, you know, teaching environment, teaching learning environment, but also on a broader level, showing how we have been reaching out to others beyond our classrooms. I don't know if that makes sense.
Okay,
Yeah,
can I just add to that?
Yeah.
All right. Sorry. So yeah, this ad is actually conceived by me. All right. So I am. That's why, like, I'm itching to comment here. So yes, there are multiple issues here. So especially with the positioning of it and the authoring of it, and also the world making and the figured or the you know, the configuration of the teacher and the student is of course there. So the first idea that, you know, don't fall back in fall, and if you see the, you know, darkness on one side and then there's a brightness on the other. So there is uncertainty about admission, especially in the public system. So we felt that, you know, so from a private university where we have the exam system ongoing, we wanted to highlight that. So don't fall back in fall. Again, this is culturally configured because fall is, again, North American system, you know, and not everyone here in Bangladesh, you know, calls it a fall semester. So that kind of positioning is, again, you know, the teacher again, it's a media studies, so you get to see the turban and all that, so it's culturally liberated. And then you have a student with the headphone, taking notes and all that. So yeah, I was just listening to this idea that how technology has been used, because traditional classroom would be the fifth picture. So the first image that would come, normally a PowerPoint presenter, and that's about it. Teacher would bring in a pen drive, start the PowerPoint, and you have the high-tech class, which is a PowerPoint presentation. But that has changed because of the COVID. And we have this idea of certainty and uncertainty. And that has been represented by the fourth image. Thank you.
I think, Felix, you want to say something?
No, I did like the links he's making about the images and the cultural interpretations he's making of those images, in terms of course, the image of the lecturer seeing students, and the whole image, if you look at it, it's not only about the representation of the technology and its application. So if you look at technology as an artifact, but also how is that artifact being used to make this kind of world. But there is also a certain way of world making. So the whole image is not just communicating. Of course, me being particularly interested in the discourses. So I see it not only as this cultural meaning of technology, but also a certain way of communicating. This is the kind of program we want you to come and experience, because it seems like you at least making people see. We are going to see that later when we talk about world making later, but there is already a hint at this is the world we're going to give you on this program, because it is an advertisement. So there is a certain way of world making here. I like that. And the analogy with don't fall back and fall again. So there is already a certain way of building, characterizing the different actors and the world, creating the world, trying to make the world around them, using that kind of technology as well.
So should we go back?
Actually, some people, I think some people actually also commented in the chat box, like, try to explain their pictures in the chat box.
But do we have time? That's what I'm.
No, it's okay. I just wanted to just let you know. That's it. You can skip it. Skip discussing those.
Okay.
Okay, we can come back to it later, but I don't think we're going to have time. Felix, Haleema, what do you think? It's 2:50 already.
Yeah.
Yeah. Let's go through, and then we can come back. If people want to stay back, we have time today.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Okay.
We are free as long as you
are free. As long as, but yeah, I know that most people might have time, so we're going to go through this a bit quickly. So Felix, if you can just do the activity quickly, maybe.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, this is what we want you to look at, really. We want to go back to this idea of technology as an artifact, but from a certain figured world. And we want to see, I was talking about artifacts earlier and talking about positioning. Now we want to use this image. And I want you to, if you can open the Padlet I've already shared. This is an image. I can't read the text. I don't know what the text means, but the image itself communicates the message. I was asking Ivy the whole background around this image. So I want you to look at that and then respond to the prompt in the Padlet. We are going to take maybe just
3 minutes. Yeah, we don't have much time.
So what characters do you see there? What kind of feelings do they reflect? Do they arouse in you, the image itself? What ideas does it give to you? What kind of challenges does it bring to your awareness by just looking at the image that is there? And what possibilities does the image represent?
And to give a bit of context, this is Government of Bangladesh's vision for use of technology in the classrooms. This is what they envision. And this is the cover of Shikkok Shommilon 2017. So that's like a conference done for multimedia teachers, primary and secondary school teachers in Bangladesh. And it was about their use of technology. And this is what the teachers were given. And this is the vision that our government has. So anything that comes to your mind, your feelings, do you perceive any challenges? Whatever comes to your mind, if you can put those words in the Padlet. So technology in Bangladesh. And you can see there's a robot, there's AI, holograms, there are drones outside, there's collaborations going on with Japan. So lots and lots of visions there.
All right. Someone is, a couple of people are typing. Yeah, that's good. Yeah. All right. Okay. Yeah. All right. This is now some people have already identified. One person at least has identified the teachers and students of the future. I like that of the future addition to the teachers and students, which is itself a way of positioning the characters in this in this image. So they are perceived, or at least being perceived, as teachers and students of the future. Now, that shows how you feel about this image. I don't know who wrote that message, but it shows already. It also alludes to the kind of feelings you have about that. So, in terms of figuring, as they say, how you figure your world, it shows that you're not putting yourself, or at least seeing yourself as part of this world that is being represented here. Now, another is saying in the chat room that it gives me hope, but I doubt whether it would be possible. Now, so again, that's kind of feelings. Now, what you're doing by looking at this image itself, you're positioning yourselves. And so far, let me check again with I haven't seen anyone who is actually positioning themselves, or at least looking at this and say, I am either the teacher in here or the student. You're positioning yourselves based on the representation, or at least the world that is being represented. Now, this is very important because you are looking at the world that has been represented to you, and then trying to make sense of the artifacts, the characters that are represented here, and saying, I'm not one of these. So you are taking back, you're, if you like, objecting to being positioned as one of these characters in this image. And that has an importance, especially because this image comes from a policymaker perspective. Now, how do you, if you don't picture yourself as one of these characters in this image, and this is how the government wants technology to be used, does that align with the possibility of you actually using technology in accordance with this vision? And that's where the concept of agency in figured worlds comes in, because now you're exercising your agency to deny being positioned as this. It arouses some feelings of identification with it, but also you use that agency to take a step back. Quality learning instead of quality teaching. Yes. Now that is an interesting way of looking at this, because there is quality being represented, but that quality in which the actors, the people who are, at least the teachers, the teachers who are here, we are all interested in quality, but not that type of quality. We see it as the quality in the future. As someone said, teachers and students of the future. So we are removing ourselves from this. Now, positioning in a figured world, as we're talking about cultural artifacts, and we're using technology as a cultural artifact, is what you have on the screen says, another process through which the figured worlds or the lived world can shape artifacts. It shapes artifacts how? Because when you interpret a given technology as being futuristic, the way you interact with it changes, because you're not from the future, you're from now. And because of that, you also change because interacting with the technology shapes you, but not interacting with it also shapes how you approach it. I started with a projector, and someone will look at the picture, one of the pictures with the projector, and say, oh, this is a teacher-centered classroom. And because of that, you're being positioned as a teacher-centered. Now, that positioning, if you are okay with that, may lead to you reacting differently, or if you're not, you also react different in another way. And this is exactly what happens. It shapes who you are. The artifacts are going to shape how you position yourself, and in the end, who you are, because it affects your position in a particular figured world in which you are. I think that's it for now, please.
Okay.
Yeah.
So up until now, we've been talking a bit about how lived worlds can shape meanings of technology, figured worlds. And Felix has been talking about how positioning acts can shape meanings of technology as well. So through positioning, through those cultural meanings, we're putting on meanings onto technology and using it to position ourselves as well. But what I'm going to go on to now is talk about how we ourselves have a bit of agency of putting the meaning. So up until now, it was these worlds outside, these social, cultural, macro structures outside. And I want to open it up, not go to Padlet. Again, I'm aware of time, but if we can just have a discussion now. Do you think it is possible to use technology in an equitable way in Bangladesh? So for instance, if you look at both images, this is the image A2I puts inside the classroom in Dhaka. So they have the projector, they have the PowerPoints, a bit of the structure. This is an image one of my participants in my PhD research sent to me. And she was telling me, this is my school. She's a teacher in this school. This is during the monsoon season. There's lots of rain. They don't even have a classroom where they can put in benches. They need to, she gave money from her own pocket so that they could make at least somewhere to put the benches on. And she says, if this is the situation, how do I use technology here day in and day out? And this is a teacher from Hatia, and she says this is kind of representative. So do you think we can use technology in Bangladesh in an equitable way, or even how A2I is envisioning at the moment? Is digital equity possible or not? What do you think? And talk about debates that come to your mind, talk about challenges that come to your mind, talk about how you feel when you think about equitable use of technology.
If I be allowed to, okay, so what I feel about, the image of A2I, and the question that is technology use actually possible in an equitable way? Well, I feel apprehensive from the beginning, because even now I see that, that boundary is there, that if you can't afford a smartphone. So in public universities, they've started the online exams. And I get worried whether all the students can afford to have the smartphone in front of them with the camera on. It's it kind of blows my mind that they actually managed to do that, that all those students managed to somehow get a smartphone from somewhere, maybe managed to buy a cheap one And again, internet is an issue. Internet quality all over the country is not the same. As you've shown in the second picture, there's in some parts of the country, it's really not possible to even have the minimums that we have of education, even without these extra technological expensive additional things. So the vision of the future, yes, gives me hope, but then again, it feels like the gap between those who can afford the technology and those who can't will just increase if the technology is not made free.
Yeah, okay. So before I go on any further, the point that
our VC sir wanted to say something.
Yeah, I will come to Shamsa, sir, before I forget, because I was analyzing as she was speaking. So the reason I put this question is to illustrate a concept that Holland et al. Calls like orchestration. It's not like cultural worlds themselves always give meaning. So a mosque, it's a space made of bricks, and our cultural religious world defines. We ourselves can sometimes give meaning by drawing or orchestrating the different discourses that we have. So for instance, if you listen to what was being said just before, there were different social voices. It was not herself. So there's technology, there's mobile phones, there's this discourse of hope, there's this discourse of the future, but then there's this discourse of basic necessities. Then we talked about quality of education. So lots and lots of discourses there. What she was doing is orchestrating, and she was balancing once against the other. And while she was balancing, what we say that people take a stance. And if you listen to what was being said, more like an author, her authorial stance was like, I'm apprehensive. That was her authorial stance. So what we do is we're not just shaped by what the artifact tells us and everything. Any artifact, technology, or any cultural artifact will evoke multiple social voices. And what we do day to day is, even in our head, when we're talking to other people, we orchestrate these social voices and then take a stance. That's what Holland et al. Says. And through orchestrating, we give a meaning. We just don't give a meaning right away. We always have these internal debates, internal reflections, and then give a meaning. Shamsa, sir? Oops.
Right. So
yes.
Thank you. No, I was just thinking about the agency. So when you talk about this construction, and especially in a situation of technological equity, I did a teacher's training at the National University, and some of the teachers were telling me that A2I, the government has given them, say, laptops. They have given them, projectors and all that. All the devices are there, but the principal would keep them under lock and key. And if a particular teacher would like to use them, so the principal, would say that if this goes wrong, you are responsible, right? So no teacher would dare to use those devices, thinking like, they're really expensive and they should not be used. So again, there are young, BCS officers who are interested in using, technology in a classroom, but the old teachers, they think that, they would be, outsmarted by their younger colleagues. So there's this fear factor. It's not only that, they want to protect the, devices or the gadgets. It's more of being old-fashioned, so being proved that, they are redundant in the system. And that was amazing. So that was kind of an eye-opener, because I had this training and I was saying like, why don't you use this technology? And they were saying that, there's no way my principal would allow me to use that. So the agency is again another issue, like, who has power and, so how this configuration is done. So I just wanted to bring that idea of authority and authorship. Yeah.
That was something that it echoes so much with what my participant said. And exactly the same thing. So what I saw, he said the same thing. My head teacher doesn't allow me to do much things. And when I analyzed that excerpt from her, I analyzed in a way like the voices, day-to-day negotiations, because every day she was talking about it, and I analyzed the negotiations. It was like hierarchy. So head teacher, there's a power rank, as we said, in figured worlds. And in her figured worlds, she didn't have the same power as the head teacher, right? And when she was talking, if you look at those excerpts, she was orchestrating in a way where she was giving power to the head teacher, but then she kept her stance. Her agency came here. Like, one day when I become a head teacher, I'm going to use technology in all of the classrooms. So when we say, like, when we look at orchestration, those discourses, and analyze it from Holland's point of view, we can see what Holland says is agency lies in that orchestration. We might not accept it. We might not be able to do it right now, but you can orchestrate and say, I agree with this, I don't agree with this. Give someone more power when you're talking to them, and give someone less power when you're talking to them. And in my thesis, I named this unintentional reproduction, unwilling reproduction of power. So her analysis, her discourse shows the voices, and the voices she likes, voices she doesn't like. But because she doesn't have power, she takes a stance where she reproduces the power structure, but she says, I am going to do this in future. I am going to do this. I am going to do that. So what Holland allows us to do is kind of go into a deeper level into those social structures and look at agency as something that you have in terms of discourses. And she has a bit of criticism of Foucault as well, but we're not going to go into that today. But I completely agree, and my participants kind of said the same things. Another word of caution here, A2I has done a wonderful job, and we're going to show that through world making. But just because authoring came up first, that's why we needed to talk about where it's not working. Right?
Can I just add just one more idea about that image of that? I really like that image. And the reason being, there was no wall.
Yeah.
You know? So the fourth wall was removed. So, so the children playing outside with the drone and the classroom, and there was like a seamless continuity, which I really liked. And I think this is very well thought out and very smart, so yeah.
So that's a vision of a world, they've made a world that we need to aspire to in relation to technology, and they're attaching those visions onto technology through images.
The incorporation of the word shikon rather than shikha, because traditionally we'd always talk about, education, but this, for the first time, I've noticed that they have used the word, learning as the key entity.
It's very, their training is very student-centered. So we're going to move on to our last. So we've been seeing how we can put on meanings through orchestrating onto technology. So we don't always put on a single meaning. Any technology we have, we can put on multiple competing meanings onto the technology. So it's not that easy. Like, I have a technology, I put on one meaning. Any technology, lots of meaning, and the meanings are always like in contention with one another. So it's a bit more complex when we bring cultural artifacts. We treat technology as a cultural artifact. Multiple social voices will be attached, and we'll always be debating within that. And that brings us to so this is Holland's formal definition of what orchestration is. So orchestration is a process through which individuals can shape technology use. And she believes that artifacts are socially inscribed and heteroglossic. By heteroglossic, we have multiple social voices. And these voices compete with each other. And we always orchestrate these voices when we're talking about that particular technology. And people might have an authorial stance. Like, okay, I like this. This is my stance. I am apprehensive. I am hopeful. Over time, some people might take a stance, some people might not take a stance in relation to all the voices that are associated with a particular technology. When I show you this picture, so we're coming to world making now, what comes to your mind? It's a paper flower. One of my participants sent me. Anything? Okay. Okay, so let me tell you. So this is a picture that the first picture actually one of my participants sent me when I asked them, because I use figured worlds, what does technology mean to you? Just as we ask you, what does technology mean to you? And all of you came up with pictures of laptops in the classroom, a teacher in the classroom, and this teacher from Hatia, a female primary school teacher, sent me this. And I was like, oh, you didn't understand my prompt. I want to know what technology represents to you, what your figured worlds is. And she said, no, Abba, I realized this is what technology is to me. This is what it means to her in her figured worlds. Now, let me explain the story behind this. I asked her why. She said, look, I am a primary school teacher, Hatia, female. Throughout my life, everyone tells me, you don't know anything. You need more training. This is a textbook. Just teach from this textbook and everything. Then A2I comes along and gives me the PowerPoint and says, you can make your lesson as you like. And she was like a woman who's been told throughout my life what to do. You don't know anything. You need more training. A2I says, you have agency. Go on. And she said, I felt very different that day. I felt I became a very different person. I went into my classroom. I made these multimedia classroom that A2I has given them. I made these paper flowers, put them all across the classroom. It represents a new beginning for me, technology. It's not a PowerPoint, it's nothing. It's me being a different kind of woman, me being a different kind of teacher who has agency, right? So Felix, you wanted to talk about world making in relation. And you can see how her figured worlds, her meaning of technology, if I put any one of the pictures that you present, your figured worlds is very different from her figured worlds and the meaning she has for technology.
Yes, thank you, Ivy. And this is one way of looking at technology. As I said in my opening contribution to this presentation, trying to convince you that technology is, in fact, an artifact. And an artifact is given meaning. It's given meaning by the people in that particular figured world. It gives meaning to them, but they also give it meaning. And the picture here, as you see, most people would look at it and ask, but what's technological about this picture? But for this teacher, it has exactly the meaning that technology has for her. And in that case, in her worldview, technology is represented in this picture. Now, it creates a meaning for technology, which most people would not understand, but she understands. Why? Because she sees that meaning, as Holland says, from her vantage point, where you're standing. Those of you who like going to hiking or climbing mountains, you know that when you go up the hill, you can't see everything at once. And anything you see depends on where you're standing. So that metaphor applies here in world making. You make the world, you give meaning to an artifact based on where you are in the particular figured world. Now, because of that, if you look at different technologies we use, let's take, for instance, a mobile phone. Now, the people who created the technology we call mobile phone, or at least those who developed it into what it is, they didn't have any other meaning than a tool used for making calls. Today's research says that the last thing people do with their mobile phones is actually making calls. Now, what does that mean? The technology has, as an artifact, has been re-given purpose, has been reinterpreted, purposed as a technology. Yes, it still is a mobile phone, but it means different things now. Now, we're going to go through a step-by-step analysis of this and see how the world is being made, or at least world making is happening at this step. Imagine you are a student in a secondary school or a primary school in Bangladesh, and your aunt or grandfather gifts you a mobile telephone. What does that? You go back to school, you're in class, and your mobile phone rings in class. What kind of thinking comes to you? What kind of world is this? If you're a teacher in that class, if you're a student in that class, you are going to give meaning to this particular technology in that moment. You're going to interpret it. Someone said in the chat earlier that technology scares us. Even the native digital natives are scared of technology. Now, it's not the technology they are actually scared of. Nobody is scared of the technology per se. We are scared of what technology means, of the meanings we are giving to this particular artifact. Because of that meaning, we are creating a new world that can be scary to us. We may not be comfortable with what a mobile phone means in class. If you're a teacher who is teaching in a class where students are bringing mobile phones, you understand that those are not just devices. They are creating a different world that has power implications. In a figured world, we're particularly conscious of power relations, of the identity it is giving, the positional identities that means. And because of this, we interpret different devices as we give different artifacts meaning. And the meaning we give to those artifacts is going to be consistent with how we locate ourselves in that particular world. So a classroom where students are using mobile phones can be construed as, the mobile phone can be as bringing independent learning to class, or as being disruptive. Now, if the technology is interpreted as disruptive, we are already creating a world in which, if students are using mobile phones, the world that is chaotic. We are scared. If we are using a mobile phone if we see mobile phones as enhancing students' independence, then we'll create a different interpretation for that kind of technology, and that carries a meaning in which we see the artifacts as bringing independence. So we make a new world based on the meaning we are attaching to this. Now, the meaning we give to an artifact like a mobile phone is also going to shape how we see the world in the end. And that is one of the things that is happening in education. We are changing how we interpret what technology means. Lots of countries are banning mobile phones in schools, for instance. Why? Because they are trying to control, to repurpose, to redefine what this kind of technology is. And here it's not all of the technology as well. The different artifacts are being interpreted differently. Most schools would be fine students having laptops in class, for instance, but not mobile phones. So then there is this world making in which particular tools are given meaning, and they become part of what is accepted, what we use to make a world, an educational world, if you like, a figured world of education that we are comfortable with as educators, or a particular world in which we wouldn't want to be positioned, and in which we are trying to create identities that are there to counter that particular worldview. And this is happening through the process of world making. And that is, as individuals, trying to shape artifacts and what they mean to us, but also the artifacts at the same time, in the same process, shaping us. Because through the experience of a particular technology, we develop a way of understanding those particular technologies. And that understanding is eventually, so it's kind of a loop, really. So you see a technology in a particular way, and when you see it that way, it gives you another way of looking at the world.
So just to end with an example of what Felix was saying, this particular teacher, when she first assigned that meaning and felt that agency in relation to technology, and towards the end of my data collection, she started showing more and more agency through using technology again and again. So what she started to do in her classroom is she said, she's writing poems and songs in relation to the lesson. So before technology came in and before she assigned that meaning, she knew that she's a primary school teacher, she knows nothing. She said that she conceptualized herself in that way. She needs more training, she can't do anything. But once she started giving that meaning, okay, the PowerPoint is something that I can show my agency in, she started creating more and more and more and more until her lessons became very creative by herself. So she makes up songs, she makes up poems, she makes up games, she blends technology with non-digital technology. So on the left, you can see that she was using a PowerPoint on wind pressure and how the wind works. And she thought, I have lots of coconut leaves and we can make those coconut leaf things and see when the students run, how it works and everything. And at the end, the students were having a bit of fun. So her classrooms changed. She experienced agency in relation to technology, and over time, her agency increased. So that's another way how world making can work, which brings us to the end. Any questions, any discussion, we're open.
Can we invite the person your comment?
Sorry, what was that?
Sorry, Ivy, is it possible to ask that person from Hatia?
Yeah, absolutely.
I would love to have a session with her.
I have 5-6 participants. All of them have shown agency in so many different ways, and it's wonderful. We can learn a lot from them.
They can be amazing role models.
They are. Like, just to share a little bit, one of the participants went forward and said, our primary school curriculum doesn't teach children morality, compassion, tolerance. And I don't like this curriculum. A primary school who first said, I'm a female, what do I know? Towards the end, she said, I want to teach compassion. And then she made this 10-minute after school club, sat with all the students, and they had Esho Bhalo Kajer Golpo Kori. And students competed with each other. Ami ajke amar dada ke pani khaiyechi. Ami ajke rasta theke stone shoriechi. আমি আজকে একটা বিড়ালের বাচ্চাকে বাঁচিয়েছি. A complete difference. So these teachers and the kinds of creative things they were doing because of that small bit of agency and confidence. And this comes, another thing, when we do educational studies, we look for only constraints, problems, lacks. Holland goes on to say, why don't we try to look for world making, creativity, improvisation, which I tried to look for in my data. And I found all of these wonderful examples.
So আমার আজকে ভালো করে আইভি সেশন অ্যাটেন্ড করেছি।
Thank you so much. ভালো কাজের কথা।
I agree with Shamshad sir. Actually, we can have a really good session, probably inviting all of them.
Love.
The 5 you mentioned.
They are lovely. All of the participants. We learned so much. My supervisors say they learned so much from those teachers.
So I would like to thank you all, the 3 presenters, very much for your intriguing presentation. I personally enjoyed, and I found it enlightening for myself because I did my PhD research on identity development of online teachers. I could relate at least to some extent. And I am afraid we do not have time to take any questions, since we're out of time.
Sorry, we're
but,
sorry.
As you mentioned, no. It's okay. But since you have mentioned that you can be here if anyone wants to chat, after we formally wrap up, probably we can do that. At this point, I would like to request our Honorable Acting Vice Chancellor and the Dean of School of Arts and Humanities, Dr. Shamshad Murtuza sir, to say a few words.
You don't need to be that formal, but thank you so much. Thank you, our all 3 of the presenters. That was amazing. So I was actually 2 timing. So I was using technology to be infidel because there was another session going on and I could not miss that one. But I was keeping my ears to Ivy. I could not miss this session, in any way. But just like, Hafsa, I was also thinking of my PhD days. And I went to Birkbeck, for some of you might know. And in my first, supervisory meeting, with my supervisor, I was supposed to write my dissertation on poetry. And in my first meeting, my supervisor, Professor William Rowe, bless his soul. So he said, in your thesis, which is going to be 80,000 to 100,000 words, I do not want to see the word creativity, creator, creation. And I was wondering, how can you talk about poetry without referring to the word creativity, creation, or creator, right? It took me almost 2 years to figure out what he was trying to do. And this is exactly what, Ivy and others have spoken about. So it's all about technique, right? So the root word technique means doing, action. So what poets do, they were creating cultural artifacts, right? So you're using art and you form into something that is artifact. So the poets that I were working on, so they are non-mainstream, new materialist poets, and they were using objects in order to express themselves. So to dismiss this idea that poetry is something that comes from a divine source. So this, Wordsworthian idea that, poetry is spontaneous overflow of powerful feelings, and the Coleridgean idea that, you have this repetition of the primary imagination, you replicate the divine into yourself. There is this big I and there's a small I, and you correspond between these two individual selves, and then you write poetry. But what technique is all about, so I ended up calling these poets technicians of the sacred and technician of the soul. So I call them technicians. So the poets, I ended up calling them technicians. And I'm so glad in this country, we have this arbitrary division between language and literature. And this was largely due to the ELT fad. And having attended the Entangled Englishes conference and having attended this session today, I'm so glad that that arbitrary fad is gone, right? So when you see our colleagues from the language discipline, using sociology in order to promote their ideas. For a long time, it was simply using songs in a classroom, how to use, I don't know what, I don't want to show you the list of publications that we all come across, so simply counting mistakes in a paper and all that. So that idea is gone. And more we are coming together as a discipline. And that is, so a sign of hope for me. Just like, so in the Untouchables, so Vaka at the end, saw that, the flush, the toilet flush was a way out from the caste system, right? So someone who was supposed to carry the tin soil, so suddenly saw that, only the untouchable was supposed to carry the, the human waste, right? But with the invention of the toilet, so technology became a liberator. And I'm so glad that technology has become a liberator for us also in the English discipline, that we can see that, here is a new challenge. And when we live up to the challenge, we redefine ourselves, because sometimes you need the other to define yourself. So just like COVID has defined our humanity, so similarly, when technology appears to be our prosthetic self, I cannot live without my cell phone. I cannot live without my laptop. So they have become part of myself, just like I'm wearing my glasses. I wear my cell phone, right? So I used to see things with my eyes. Now I see things with my with the camera of my phone. So they are my prosthetic selves. So with this technology, like, so there is going to be new way of configuration. There is new way of authoring the world. There is a new way of, world making. And thank you, Ivy, Felix, Dr. Haleema, so you have been amazing. And I'm sure that this is the beginning of a long partnership. And we're going to have more sessions from you and learn from one another. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Sir, for your wonderful words. I would like to thank you again, Taslima Sadia, Haleema Sadia, and Felix for the wonderful session. And thank you all for participating and making it so lively. And I would like to thank everyone who made this session possible, actually, who worked, behind the scene. I would like to conclude this session formally, but I believe our three presenters will be here a little bit for you to be able to chit chat with them and ask the questions or make comments if you would like. Thank you very much again. I would like to wrap it up formally.
Thank you everyone. Felix, Haleema, you want to say anything?
Good evening, everyone.
Thank you very much. I was very much pleased to get to meet people from this context, which is not the kind of context I'm used to. I'm from Rwanda, as I said, but I like to meet and interact with academics from different backgrounds, and it's a very big opportunity for me to start interacting with people from. Of course, I've worked with Ivy for over 4 years now, but it's also good to meet the team here represented from different universities in Bangladesh and to discuss these kinds of socio-cultural aspects to technology, because that's something that I'm interested in. So thank you very much for hosting us, and we look forward to further collaborations, as the Chancellor was saying.
Yeah, thank you very much from my side as well. I was actually technology was not my field, but I have used these theories in my thesis, and yeah, like these theories I've written about. So I was thinking, how would it go, and how will it go? But it was really beautiful. I felt completely at home, and thank you for the environment, for everything. So yes, looking forward to any future collaborations. So thank you. Yeah.
So much.
Maybe we can have this in person someday.
Oh yeah.
Similar kind of session. Okay, so I would like to request IT to stop recording now.